So the form we're going to have, the format is that first of all, there will be an introduction of all candidates. We will then have, that will take no longer than a minute, and you will be timed, so just to let everybody know. And then there are 7 prepared questions, and each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer that question. I will be rotating who gets to ask first, second to fifth. And at the end, this does go to 11, so at the end, if there is time, the individuals over there will have chosen some questions that they feel are appropriate. So without further ado, I will open the mic up now for candidates to give us a 1-minute introduction of themselves before we do this alphabetical. Rob Bogdanovic, People's Party of Canada.
Okay. So yeah, I'm Rob Bogdanovic. I've been a teacher in Chilliwack Senior for about 20 years. I've been a lifelong resident of Chilliwack. And I got into this race quite unexpectedly. A year ago, I was not thinking of getting into politics. I've always been interested in politics. But basically what was happening, I was looking at what was happening on the political scene, and I was incredibly discouraged by what I was seeing. We seem to have an entire political system that is imprisoned by political correctness. And no one is able to talk about the tough issues that we as a country need to wrestle with, because they're afraid of offending a small minority of Canadians who manage to define the boundaries of political correctness. So I got into the race when I saw Max Bernier step outside of that box. He basically said, we need to have tough conversations in this country. We need to start really fighting for the future that we want, and we cannot be held hostage by individuals who are going to hurl every kind of insult at you just because we don't want to be insulted.
Thank you very much. Next, Arthur Green, the Green Party of Canada.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Arthur Green. I was born in Mission, BC in 1955. My family first settled in the Fraser Valley in the 1800s. I'm a 4th generation Canadian. I attended and graduated from Agassiz Secondary in 1973 and immediately started a career in Forest Service management and protection. From forestry, I moved on to the oil and gas industries as a roughneck in Alberta, but taking time off in the Fraser Valley. From there, I moved on to the financial services, where I studied at Fraser Valley University and eventually started my own financial services company, the Green Shelters Corporation. After several years of successful operation, I began my career as an art department head in the BC motion picture industry for some of the largest mass media corporations in North America. After 30 years of dedicated service in cinema, my passion for politics arose, and now, after a lifetime of studying federal politics, it's time to give back. In my spare time, you can find me on my bicycle cycling somewhere exotic, or on a hike, or in my swimming pool, studying politics, putting my prayers in order, and planning for a better world. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Next, Heather McMillan, Youth Democratic Party.
Hi there. I'm Heather McQuillan, and much like Rob, I wasn't expecting to get into politics. I am a member of INC M1, along with Arthur Green. I'm a technician in the film industry. And as we grew our family, we really started to see how pressed families were. And it really inspired both my husband and I to step forward and see if we can make some changes. Where we started a nonprofit called Moms in Film. We advocate for families in the film industry, and we'd really like to do that for families across Canada. When I started it, I thought it would be 5 moms that got together and got a nanny so we could figure this out and stay working. Ooh, I'm a little bit nervous. But I got hundreds of emails, and those emails reached out beyond the film industry, and they were coming in from families who were needing to care for their family members, who were concerned about the environment, who were worried about what they were leaving for their families. And I just really want to be a part of changing what we're doing. I want a government that can work for the people and help us get to where we need to be.
Thank you, Heather. Mark Strahl, Conservative Party of Canada.
Hi there, my name is Mark Strahl, and I'm born and raised here in Chilliwack. I've been married to my wife Lisa for 20 years, and our son turns 15 in a couple of weeks. And we love living, working, and raising our family here in Chilliwack. It's been an honor to serve as a Member of Parliament for Chilliwack-Hope for the last 8 years, and I'm asking you to continue to put your trust in me as a strong representative who fights for you here at home and in Ottawa. I've never taken this position for granted, and I'm working hard for every vote in this election. It's been a pleasure to work with the Chilliwack Healthier Community's organization. This is an organization that shares best practices, it considers all perspectives, and it puts rivalries aside to work together for the people who live here. And that's a real example that we should all be looking to follow, to always be looking for the best solutions for our community. So thank you for your service to our community. Thank you for organizing this debate, and I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you, Mr. Strahl. Kelly Valonis, the Liberal Party of Canada.
I'm Kelly Valonis. I have lived in the Fraser Valley for the past 43 years. I've grown up here. I've raised my family here. This is my home. I am committed and dedicated both in my professional and personal life. Currently, I am the Executive Director for the Chilliwack District Seniors Resource Society, a role that I take great pride in, one that offers me the ability to advocate for and support seniors in accessing the programs and services that they need in their life. Prior to that, I worked for the Greater Vancouver YMCA as Program Manager for youth programs. I'm proud that I was able to support youth going through crisis and provide them opportunities to find success in their life. For the past 20 years, I've worked in the nonprofit sector. The skills that I've acquired there of bringing community partners together, working with all levels of government, and making sure that we provide programs and services needed for the people in our communities that need them the most. I am part of Rotary, Imagination Library, and part of the CHC. Some people call me tenacious. Some people would say I'm a dog with a bone. I don't quit. I don't back down.
Your time is up.
And that's why I'm running in this election. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introductions. So we now have 7 questions. Each candidate has 3 minutes to answer the question. And these questions are all driven by the mandate of the CHC and the interests of the community and social issues here in our community. I'm going to start with Arthur Green. I'm going to mix it up a bit. The first question, I think it's posted as well. Many people see the value in primary prevention, but government spending is often focused on the most expensive ends of health and social services. If you agree that more needs to be done upstream, what is your strategy for balancing the system so that primary prevention receives an equal share of investments?
Thank you for the question. I indeed believe a lot of the problems we face in preventative health care has a lot to do with our modern lifestyles and affordability. I believe the Greens' plan for an eventual guaranteed livable income is at least one of the solutions for a very complex problem. As it stands right now, a lot of families, including the working poor, just can't afford to eat healthy. Fresh vegetables have become incredibly expensive, making it far less expensive to lean towards fast food. I also believe that automation plays a key role. Where we used to exercise more in daily life, our attraction to pre-made and single-use instruments is playing havoc with our immune systems. We're also overexposed to toxins, petrochemicals, glyphosate, and other cancer-causing agents. Incentives for a healthy lifestyle could also be covered in a guaranteed livable income strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Next, Mark Strahl, Conservative Party of Canada.
Thank you very much. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer has issued a health and social program guarantee, a commitment to maintain and increase the Canada Health Transfer and the Canada Social Transfer by at least 3% per year, as is currently mandated in legislation. In 2019-2020, The two transfers are providing $55 billion to the provinces and territories, the level of government that is responsible for delivering these services. Under a new Conservative government, Canadians will be able to count on stable and predictable health and social program funding. It's critical that Canadians have confidence in these programs, that then they'll be there for them when they need them. This is what the guarantee is all about. Stable federal funding is important to ensure a quality public health care system in every province and territory. We also recently announced that a new Conservative government would invest $1.5 billion in its first term to purchase new MRI and CT equipment and replace aging equipment and increase the total number of machines, bringing Canada's medical imaging equipment in line with international standards and reducing wait times. This investment will ensure that Canadians will be able to access vital scans for cancer, stroke, heart, and other conditions. Giving Canadians access to a waiting list is not giving them access to health care. That's why our plan takes concrete action to ensure that the diagnostic tools that Canadians need to determine their care plan can be achieved in a timely fashion. A new Conservative government won't try to make decisions on what is best for health care from Ottawa, but will work with the provinces and regional health authorities who are closer to the people and better able to determine the unique needs of each area.
Thank you. Kelly Valonis, Liberal Party of Canada. Thank you. I absolutely see the value in primary prevention, and I share the concerns of this committee. This is one of the reasons I'm running, as healthcare is a priority for people in this community, and it's a priority for me. I agree, we need to do more. I am not a career politician, and I am not an expert in politics, but I am an expert in getting the right people together and getting things done. And this is where my skill set of working with community partners and different levels of government will be an asset. I want to make sure that we are looking through the lens of primary prevention, and we need to be working with Fraser Health, Home Health, Chilliwack Division of Family Practice, PCRS, CYC, CHC, Stolo, and other community partners. We need to bring the right people to the table and make sure the right message is being heard in Ottawa. Education is key. We need to increase awareness and prevention. Again, we need to work with the right partners, schools, community agencies, our senior agencies, and make sure we're getting the right education out to the people that need it the most regarding health and safe habits. And the right resources are made through federal dollars. Working alongside our provincial government, again, this is where I can use my skills of bringing people together and getting results. Safety is key. Making sure the right legislation is in place to ban the control and use of hazardous products. Continuing to increase our vaccination rates to protect families and communities from preventable diseases. I'm proud that the Liberal government committed $25 million in 2016 for vaccinations. I'm proud to say the Liberal Party has just announced that we will continue our commitment in healthcare with a down payment investment over the next 4 years to support a stronger pharmacare and healthcare public system. Promising to work with provinces in the system and making sure people have a doctor and a primary health care. As we all know, these are key to primary prevention. As your MP, I'll make sure that primary prevention receives an equal share of the pie. Thank you. Heather McCullough.
So when I read this question, I was really excited because our entire platform follows this model. We are going to expand Medicare to a head-to-toe model. So that will include dental, eye care, hearing care. We want to make sure that there's easy access for seniors to access long-term care, and that in itself relieves a lot of pressure off of caregivers. It allows them a chance to take care of themselves. It allows for seniors to easily take care of themselves. This was something we committed to early on, and it's something that the party really believes in. We also believe, much like Arthur does, that it's important that people have access to healthy food, and that we work to create good systems for creating essentially inexpensive options for healthy healthy eating. We also plan to address the opioid crisis and look at that from a core issue. We will be investigating drug companies that have pushed the use of opioids, and we will be looking to take care of people who have been affected by that. We're looking at decriminalization so that people can get access to good health care. So across the board, this is the core issue of what the NDP stands for. And it's something that we've seen the NDP follow through provincially. You know, when they make a promise, they follow through. And I don't think it's something we've always seen with our governments, but we have a track record provincially, and you'll see the same thing from a federal level NDP government.
Thank you very much. And finally, Robert Gunvig.
Yeah, when I hear this question, I think along terms of the upstream, the targeting of interventions at the earliest moment is absolutely essential. And the question I have is, where should that be coming from, that intervention? There's an old adage that says it takes a village to raise a child. And I firmly believe that's true, but it says it takes a village, it doesn't take an empire. And what we have in Canada with the federal level is an empire imposing upon provinces and municipalities in all kinds of ways because it's controlling the purse strings of the nation. There's too much money at the federal level, and then they send it down to the provincial level with strings attached, and there's too many chefs in the kitchen. And what we need to do is we need to rethink the very funding models that exist within this country so that the money is attached to the communities, raised within the communities, within the provinces, and that is not all just being gathered by the federal government and then being parceled out. Because that doesn't lead to fairness, and of course, the further you are removed from the child that you're trying to help, the further you're removed from the person that you are trying to care for, the many steps that are involved, the less personal that is to the individuals making decisions. So we have to approach this from a new way. And so what the PPC wants to do is it wants to shrink the size of the federal government and allow the tax points that we give up to be handed over to the provinces. An example would be, we want to get rid of the GST, and before you celebrate the loss of that tax, we want the PSTs to rise, and so the provinces can directly control that revenue and shape it to their own needs. That would also allow them to shape the PST to address things like housing. If there's issues in BC that are different from Saskatchewan, they would have control of the tax, and instead of it being a top-down, one-size approach for all, we would get a possibility of having the provinces innovate and care. I think that there's certain things that the federal government can do. I agree that we need to be promoting healthy eating, but again, that has to happen from the ground up, not the top down. Although it would help if Andrew Scheer was not opposing the new food guide, which is giving really good advice, and yet he doesn't like it for reasons he hasn't fully articulated. I think that we need to make sure, though, that the individuals who are directly investing into these areas have all the resources that they need.
Thank you. So for question number 2, our coalition believes that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was a monumentally positive step in our nation's history, and all Canadian citizens should attend to the calls to action issued by the Commission. Are you familiar with the calls to action? How would you address them in your role? Which calls to action would your party prioritize first? I'm going to ask Mark Strahl, Conservative Party of Canada, to be the first respondent.
Well, thank you very much, and yes, certainly I am familiar with the TRC and their calls to action. My father was the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs at the time of the 2007 apology, which created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as part of the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, which recognized that the Indian residential school system had a profoundly lasting and damaging impact on Aboriginal culture, heritage, and language, the impacts of which are still being felt today. The Commission's report reflected the hard work and dedication to building public awareness about residential schools and fostering reconciliation, understanding, and respect. The final report of the TRC helped explain this dark chapter in Canadian history, and the calls to action addressed the legacy of the residential schools and advanced the process of reconciliation. The Conservative Party supports the reconciliation process with Indigenous peoples, and I believe that is how reconciliation must be viewed, not as a destination we will eventually get to, but a process and a journey that we must continue to travel together. I believe that Chilliwack and the Stalo Nations have been an example that we should seek to replicate across the country. There has to be a real, genuine, and heartfelt relationship to have a lasting impact, and through the leadership of people like Chief David Jimmy, that's happening right here in Chilliwack. Conservatives are focused on bringing forward policies that make real and measurable improvements in the lives of Indigenous peoples, and I believe that the most important of these is dealing with the education system. Until we can ensure that Indigenous children have access to an education system that provides them with the same opportunities as non-Indigenous children, there can be no reconciliation. This was a focus of my time as the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. We need to improve the education system right now. Funding isn't the same for Indigenous children as it is for non-Indigenous, and the outcomes we know when Indigenous children are given those same opportunities, when they're given that same education, the health outcomes, the outcomes for their economic opportunities throughout their lives are improved. So to me, that is where the main focus should be going forward in response to the calls to action.
Thank you. Robert Legendre.
Yeah, the residential schools was unquestionably an act of genocide. I've been teaching about it for 20 years, and in that, what you see is the Geneva Convention on Genocide. They have 5 criteria, and we met all 5 of them for most of those decades. It was a horror show. Now, that's a real legacy that we have to deal with, and so I think all Canadians share in some level of the guilt. At least we have to recognize what our ancestors have done, what past generations have done, and many of them didn't know what was going on because the media was complicit in covering it up as well. They were silent on this issue. I got high school textbooks on history, including Canada people's history, never mentioned it. Like, never gave it any more than a few lines, and usually it was just talking about the diseases that were running through the schools. Regarding the report, my priorities, and I believe it would be the PPC's priorities, would be to focus on child welfare and education. Those are the ones that appear first within the document. They are the first calls to action, and we have to make sure that those are the priorities that are given. There are several elements of the Truth and Reconciliation call to actions that I think need to be looked at and that Canadians need to be openly discussing. One of them is call number 6. And call number 6 asks to repeal Section 43 of the Criminal Code. Section 43 of the Criminal Code is what protects parents from being essentially charged with an assault when they reasonably spank their child. And I don't know how that got into this document or what the logic behind that is. I would like to have a conversation with those who wrote the document and find out why they are trying to dictate parenting strategies to all Canadians. I certainly think that's something that Canadians should have a conversation about, since some levels of government have been saying that they want to implement the whole of the recommendations. Several things. We already had a inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls. And my question has been, since that call went forth, why aren't we considering the missing and murdered Aboriginal men and boys, which is 71% of the missing and murdered Aboriginal people? It doesn't make much sense to me why we are ignoring that, and why isn't there an inquiry to look into that as well? And there were those who were asking for that at the outset, but they were shut down, apparently because maybe male lives don't matter. I'm not sure what the logic is here. And then on the last call, and this is just something that the PPC is not going to be able to get behind, not the last call, call 84. And call 84 asked for a restoration and increase in funding for the CBC. And the PPC actually wants to defund the CBC. Everything else, pretty much, I can get behind on some level. Some things would have to have parameters discussed. But I think we, as Canadians, owe it to look closely at this report and not just assume that we can say we believe in all 94. We should spend some time, understand what it's recommending, and then give it attention and give it discussion within this nation.
Thank you very much. Kelly Villanos.
Thank you. I share your belief, and I see this as a positive step in our nation's history. I have read the 94 calls to action for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. I cannot speak to all 94, yet I believe they all hold equal and value and importance. As your MP, how I will address them is by making sure that I recognize them. As a community, we need to always be working from a place of respect. It would be my role as your MP to seek understanding, to listen and to ask the Indigenous communities here what is most important to them. Which calls of action are the ones that are most important to them? I feel it would be presumptuous of me to assume that I know what is most important, of which ones that I should prioritize. A good leader asks the right questions of the right people. My experience working in this community and being part of this committee has taught me that. I am very proud that the Liberal Party has invested in the Truth and Reconciliation, and we will continue to do so. We have reduced the number of Indigenous children in care, not by enough, but it's a start and we need to keep moving forward. Since July 2016, 218,000 requests for Jordan's Principle have been approved for vital health, education, and mental health services. Collaboratively, we are working to eliminate the education and employment gaps that Mark Strahl spoke about, because there shouldn't be a gap between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people when it comes to employment and when it comes to education. I will continue to see that we are living these 94 calls of action within our community and within our country.
Thank you very much. Heather McQuillan.
So I've done a lot of work with our Truth and Reconciliation through our Human Rights Committee and our union. And ultimately, the most important thing that we can do is consult and honor what they need. And as your representative, that's what I would do. That would be my priority, is to consult and honor what is needed. Additionally, we need to do so much work with the missing and murdered Indigenous women and make sure that even in remote communities, people are taken care of from the core level. So we need to make sure there is access to health care for everyone. And that doesn't just mean people that are close to centers. That means that we're making sure that every single person can reach out and can get access, early and consistent access to, medical and dental, eye care. These all contribute to quality of life. And we have let communities, whether they be Indigenous communities or small towns, we've really let that pass by. And I think it's really important that we remember that every Canadian is a Canadian, and we all deserve that. And so in addition to consulting and honoring, that's something that's very important to me, is that we take care of every single person, no matter where they are. They need to have access.
Thank you very much. Arthur Green.
Well, our priorities in the calls of action would begin with the implementing the recommendations from the inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We work in partnership with the Assembly of First Nations to implement their agenda in all elections. We'd ensure that every First Nations, maybe an Inuit child, has access to quality education opportunities based on the expressed cultural, political, and social priorities of the First Nations, maybe an Inuit governments, following meaningful consultation. We support the development of Indigenous education curricula that are language and cultural specific. We'd increase access to post-secondary education for Indigenous youth, as well as fully funding the program backlog. We'd support and sustain the transmission, proliferation, and regeneration of Indigenous cultural works and languages. We'd work to educate non-Indigenous Canadians on the histories, customs, traditions, and the cultures of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people of Turtle Island. We'd work to end the drinking water boil advisories by investing and upgrading critical infrastructure to ensure safe water access in every community. We prioritize quality, safe, and affordable housing, particularly in the north, and ensure equitable distribution of resources for energy efficiency retrofits. We've improved food security in northern communities by consulting with residents on Arctic farming, working with nonprofit groups to build greenhouses or hydroponic towers, and funding education programs in nutrition and horticulture. We'll support healthcare services that incorporate traditional practices and recognize the role of extended families and elders. We'll devote sufficient resources for maternal and infant care, mental health services, and treatment for diabetes and tuberculosis. And finally, we'll sustain the Aboriginal Health Human Resources Initiative to continue capacity building in the healthcare profession for Indigenous communities.
Thank you very much. So the third question is, in Chilliwack's last municipal election, two of the most prominent issues raised were 1, housing availability and affordability, and 2, the rapid increase in homelessness in Chilliwack. As the demand for housing increases in Chilliwack, the cost for housing in those at risk of homelessness also increases, and it makes it nearly impossible for those already homeless to access housing. What would your party do to ensure there are adequate housing options available for low to middle income families, and what types of programs and housing resources would you make available for those who are homeless or at imminent risk of becoming homeless, and how would you fund it? So I'm going to ask Heather McQuillan to answer that question first.
Thank you. So first, we have committed to building 500,000 affordable housing units over the next 10 years. So that's, that kind of takes care of one of the issues, but it doesn't take care of all of the issues. And making sure that we catch people before they're homeless, before they're facing a crisis is really important. So providing pharmacare and healthcare early on, providing mental health care supports early on, those are imperative aspects to solving the problem of homelessness. We've also committed to increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and that's also really important. Corporations have had a long-standing history of suppressing wages, and we want to make sure that while housing prices are going up, wages are going up as well. And it's really a complex problem, but it's holistically covered on our platform through those 3 main centers. And yeah, I would say that's essentially what we're working towards, and that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Stroll.
Thank you. I've been privileged to be a member of the Chilliwack Homelessness Task Force for the last 4 years, which, like this group, has brought together service providers to work toward the shared goal of addressing homelessness in our community. And I think Chilliwack has been very successful in bringing online a number of social housing units over the last 4 years as this issue has become front and center in our community. One of the things that we took on at the beginning of this mandate was that the city of Chilliwack was unable to access homelessness partnership funding because we were too small to qualify for the urban envelope and too big to qualify for the rural envelope. So we worked together with many people in this room to pressure the government to change that system, which they did. And as a result, Chilliwack was able to receive a lot of homelessness partnership funding for things like the Innovative Housing Hub project, which has been a great success. Unfortunately, there have been some signals that system is changing, and that once again we'll go back to a communities-based approach where only certain communities qualify for projects, and instead of every community that's facing homelessness problems. And I think we need to focus on all the communities that have this issue. Certainly Chilliwack does, even though we are not Vancouver. Housing First programs are necessary, I think, because without a home, people can't maintain a job, they can't maintain their health, and they can't look after their families. So we need to ensure that that is part of our program mix going forward. I held a roundtable in in my office this year on affordable housing with social housing service providers, developers, real estate professionals, municipal and provincial leaders. And we all agreed that every level of government has a role to play in addressing housing affordability. And we also agreed that government alone cannot address this problem. It will take an increase in social housing, an increase in rental housing stock, and an increase in market housing supply to address this crunch that we are in. And if any part of the housing continuum fails to keep pace, every part of it suffers, which leads to overall issues with affordability. Andrew Scheer has announced our 4-point plan to help people buy their first home. The first thing we'll do is fix the liberal mortgage stress test, which has kept too many home buyers out of the market. We'll increase amortization periods on insured mortgages to 30 years for first-time home buyers. We're going to launch an inquiry into money laundering in the real estate sector, and we're going to make surplus federal real estate available for development to increase the supply of housing. Again, as to how these programs will be funded, we're committed to increasing the support for the provinces and territories who do have the primary responsibility for delivering affordable housing programs in this province.
Kelly Valonis. Thank you. I have to say, Mark, it does concern me that you voted against Bill C-97. You voted against housing being a human right in April 2019. Housing and homelessness is a major issue and concern in this community. And we need to make sure that we are working with all levels of government and community stakeholders to address this issue. Safe and secure housing is a priority for me and for the Liberal Party, making sure we are working in conjunction with our governments to provide housing strategies that work and work with community partners to make sure we have adequate shelters as well as access to programs and services for the people that need it the most. I'm very proud of the National Housing Strategy. In more than $7 billion we've invested in housing. Here in Chilliwack, through our federal affordable housing program, we have a 67-unit rental property on Webb Avenue. At least 25 of those units will be middle-class families for the next 21 years. Ruth and Naomi's. This is an amazing example of how federal, provincial, and municipal governments come together. $7 million under the Social Infrastructure Fund we've invested. 36 rental suites for low-income families. 20 daycare spaces, and a teaching kitchen and wellness center. I will continue to support and push for funding to address our homeless epidemic and continue to work with community partners and all levels of government. The Conservatives' proposal to fix Canada's mortgage stress test, yeah, it's welcomed by the housing industry because it's going to bring them dollars. Yet Canada's housing agency and the bank regulators say it's just going to make our housing price go up and the money in our pockets go down. They want to offer developers access to federal land. I'm not seeing the value in that. Thank you very much. Robert Buchanan.
I think that when we're trying to deal with an issue like this, we have to understand it's an issue of supply and demand. That's the fundamental reality of this. It's an issue of supply and demand. And there's a lot of individuals who are trying to solve this on the supply side. And we do have to put some things in on the supply side. But we also have to understand the demand side and be able to understand that as long as the demand keeps increasing and increasing, we will not be able to solve this housing issue. It's just a simple economic reality. Mark Strahl's suggestion that he just put forth, such as allowing 30-year mortgages, which, by the way, didn't go too well for the United States with their housing crisis prior to 2009, that's just increasing demand without doing anything to really help the supply, and it seems to be quite counterintuitive. Now, they also want to go after the money laundering within the industry. That certainly is something that has to be looked at. It's a serious problem. I wish we were doing more on that already. When we talk about building 500,000 units as being recommended by the NDP, again, this is not going to fundamentally help the problem because you're building 500,000 units at a cost of, I'm guessing, about $5 billion a year for 10 years. Okay, that will help to increase supply. you are increasing the number of individuals who are coming into the country, many of whom are going to be the ones trying to access those units. And so if you increase immigration from 320,000 to 400,000 or more, you are actually finding yourself falling further behind in the equation. The solution to this is actually to bring our immigration levels down to something we knew in the 1990s. We are proposing bringing our immigration down to about 100 to 150,000, targeting it and making sure that it's bringing in the type of economic migrants that we need, the individuals who can actually add to our jobs and our economy. This actually will probably save the country significant amounts of money, $20 billion quite possibly, in savings due to the realities of the economics. Right now, our system is failing. 40% of the shelter space in Toronto is being occupied by newcomers who have not found that Canada has worked very well for them. That's a massive increase from what it was a few years ago. We have seen a doubling of newcomers who are finding themselves homeless in Canada in just 2 years. This has to be addressed. And we cannot ignore the immigration question. Only one party is actually talking about this.
Thank you. And finally, Arthur Green.
The Green Party will enhance the federal government's contribution to meeting the housing needs of Canadians through direct investments, changes to tax policies, and lending and granting programs, putting the government's focus where it's urgently needed. We'll legislate housing as a legally protected fundamental human right for all Canadians and permanent residents. We'll appoint a Minister of Housing to strengthen the national housing strategy so that it meets the needs of affordable housing that are unique to each province and oversee its implementation in collaboration with provincial ministers. This recognizes that housing is a provincial jurisdiction. The target would be 25,000 new and 15,000 rehabilitated units annually for the next 10 years. We'll increase the National Housing Co-Investment Fund by $750 million for new builds and the Canadian Housing Benefit by $750 million for rent assistance for 125,000 households. We'll create a Canada Co-op housing strategy that would update the mechanisms for financing co-op housing in partnership with the CMHC, co-op societies, credit unions, and other lenders. We'll eliminate the first-time home buyers grant. To do all this, we'll include new and existing housing as eligible infrastructure for funding purposes, allowing Canada Infrastructure Bank to support provincial and municipal housing projects. We'll also provide financing to nonprofit housing organizations and cooperatives to build and restore quality, energy-efficient housing for seniors, people with special needs, and low-income families. We'll restore tax incentives for purpose-built rental housing, including tiny homes, smaller condominiums, repurposed older buildings, cooperatives, and even mobile housing, as our current housing strategies are simply unsustainable. This may result in one of the greatest government investments in Canadian history. So if we can build affordable housing units and keep them in the realm of the provincial income assistance rates, we could actually be creating capital investment with money that we are currently giving away now that has absolutely no return on investment. For investment-savvy investors, this could also be a win-win. If the government agencies involved work with them strategically, keeping finished housing products simple and practical, this would result in an infinity of new construction jobs and solve the housing crisis in a practical, pragmatic, and affordable, and alleviating stress on the economy by not having to use up the resources of our social welfare and safety net systems. And lastly, we've changed the legislation that prevents Indigenous organizations from accessing financing through the CMHC to invest in self-determined housing needs.
Thank you very much. So question number 4, what role do you think the federal government has to play in poverty reduction, and what are promising / effective strategies that you would be prepared to back? So I'm going to ask Mark Strahl to be the first to answer that question.
Thank you. Earlier this month, I participated in the grand opening of Work BC's new office at the Southgate Shopping Centre, and I was struck by something that the manager of that facility said. She said that she believes, and they believe there at Work BC, in the life-changing power of a job, that a job gives value and purpose that nothing else can. And they're working with clients who are looking for work and matching them up with employers who are looking for workers. And when the skill sets of the workers don't quite line up with the available jobs, they're providing training to upgrade skills and open up opportunities. These are the types of programs that I believe we should support. One of the best things that government can do is provide education and opportunities that equip our kids not only for the jobs of the future, but for the jobs that are available right now. We need to make sure we are encouraging our kids to pursue training that will help them get a job. And that means promoting things like the skilled trades, which will see a massive shortfall of workers in the very near future if we don't start to provide the right kind of training. The federal government also needs to create the conditions for good jobs to be created and maintained. We need to leave more money in the pockets of Canadians so that they have more money to support themselves, their families, and their aging parents. By cutting taxes for Canadians in the lowest income bracket, we will ensure that those who need it the most will be able to keep more of their hard-earned paychecks to spend on everyday essentials like groceries, gas, and rent. By having a competitive business environment, we can ensure that job creators make the investments in our country and in our community that will support stable, family-supporting jobs. Consecutive governments have come to realize the benefits of providing supports directly to parents with children through the Universal Child Care Benefit and now the Canada Child Benefit. These programs have lifted hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty, and a new Conservative government will maintain those programs and look for other innovative ways to help Canadians get ahead.
Thank you very much. Arthur Green.
Greens believe reducing child poverty starts with a stronger commitment to guaranteeing that all families have the ability to provide for their children. Research has demonstrated that programs providing a universal basic income reduce expenditures on health care, since poverty is the single largest detriment of ill health and the justice system, and increases school retention. School programs are affordable, but the savings and cost implementation and experience in different orders of government. To proceed will require cooperation of each province, territory, and Indigenous community through a vehicle such as the Council of Canadian Governments. We'll establish a universal guaranteed livable income program to replace the current array of income supports, such as disability payment, social assistance, and income supplement for seniors. Building on the market-based measure, which is Canada's official poverty line, payments would be set at a livable level for different regions of the country. A negotiation to implement a livable income across the country would take place through the Council of Canadian Governments. Unlike existing income support programs, additional income would not be clawed back. Those earning above a certain total income would pay their guaranteed livable income back in their share of taxes. As well, we'll establish a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. Canada once had a national wage standard, but it was removed by a previous Liberal government. Reinstating a federal minimum wage will create a wages floor for every Canadian, no matter where they work or live. Through the Council of Canadian Governments and StatsCan, we'll set municipal minimum wages in accordance with different costs of living across the country. We'll design and implement a national mental health strategy to address the link between mental wellness and work productivity. We'll support a private members bill, C-344, which would require a successful bidders of federal infrastructure contracts to maximize spin-off community benefits for such contracts. This will strengthen the opportunity for Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit-owned businesses, social enterprise, cooperatives, and communities.
Thank you. Kelly Valonis.
Thank you. I believe we have a huge role to play in poverty reduction, and that is why the Liberal Party developed the National Poverty Reduction Strategy. I will work tirelessly to ensure that we are moving forward and continuing to reach these goals. The goals that we have set for a 20% reduction in poverty by 2020 and a 50% reduction by 2030. Is it enough? No. Is it a start? Yes. One that I will continue to push forward on, because no person should ever live in poverty. The Liberal government has raised over 300,000 kids out of poverty with our child tax benefit program. I've spoken with families in Chilliwack and in Hope, and I've asked them, what's the impact of these dollars to you? Some have said to me, it's been the difference between them paying for their hydro or buying groceries. Now that's not a decision that I think any parent should have to make. I don't want to make that, and I don't want my kids to have to make that decision. We have lifted 650,000 people out of poverty. 57,000 have been seniors. Now seniors are an important population to me. I work with seniors. I see seniors struggling every day to pay for their medication, to pay for their rent, to pay for their groceries, and then to maybe do something outside of that that might be considered fun in these golden years. My mom is a widow and a senior, and she's on a fixed income. This is personal for me. I will continue to work with all levels of government to ensure we are providing more money to those who need it most. I support the Liberal plan of giving more money to seniors as they age, because as we know, seniors are living longer. Our promise for health care and affordable prescriptions, implementing universal pharmacare, and affordable housing, these are all strategies that are going to put money back into our pockets, money that we can use to raise ourselves out of poverty. I want to put my experience to work for the residents here and continue moving forward in this poverty reduction strategy.
Thank you. Heather McQuillan.
So provincially, the NDP worked to create the new childcare spaces fund. And that's something that they followed through on. They've been working through communities all over BC to make sure that we have adequate childcare. And that's something that the federal government will expand upon and support. It's something that we've seen practiced. We know they follow through. And that's something that I don't think we've seen a lot with our previous governments. We don't see the follow through. And with the NDP, you know that they're going to follow through. They're going to eliminate interest on federal student loans. The government shouldn't be making money off of student loans. They shouldn't be making money off people trying to better themselves and raise themselves out of poverty. And so that is something we can commit to. We commit to, again, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We commit to protecting pensions and making sure that seniors are taken care of. But most importantly, we are here to fight for you. We are not here to fight on the side of corporations. And corporations have lawyers that fight for them. The government needs to fight for you. And we've seen our governments fight for corporations. They don't need to fight for corporations. That's not what a government does. And so we commit to fighting for you and making sure that you have equal representation. Even if you as an individual doesn't have a lawyer to negotiate your contracts, we know that the government can stand up and make sure that you're given a fair go at things. And that's the most important thing that we can give to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Robert.
The first rule of economics is often scarcity. There's a limited amount of resources. And the first rule of politics appears to be that we will ignore the first rule of economics. You'll notice that what's not being addressed in question, both 3 and 4, is the last part of question 3, how would you fund it? And of course, we have to understand that all things that are given out by the government come from one source. It comes from us. We are the taxpayer. Now, Mark Strahl said that he doesn't want to leave more money into the hands of Canadians, and I think that's a smart approach. We keep putting forward policies that we believe will leave a lot more money in the hands of Canadians. He also raised jobs training, and I think that's a very important strategy on the issue of poverty. But the idea that we can go with a universal basic income, or the idea that minimum wage automatically solves the problem, you raise it to $15, poverty is gone, then why not $50? Why not $100 minimum wage? They studied this in Seattle, and it did not have the effect that they thought it would have on the lowest income earners. It actually led them to get fewer hours and all kinds of other issues that arose. And so we have to be aware that there are not simple fixes to the issue of poverty. But there is one thing that seems to be being missed in all this. There is a connection between poverty and crime. Now, a lot of people will tell you that poverty causes crime, but actually in many cases the inverse is true. It's the crime within communities that actually leads to poverty. Crime can destroy communities, it can destroy infrastructures, it can hurt businesses, it can lead to fewer job investments. We need to be aware that this is part of the equation. And what we should be doing is making sure that our laws work for Canadians. We need to make sure that we have more resources to the RCMP, that we are making sure that we are tracking down on the corruption that does exist in the corporate realm. We have to understand that if there is embezzlement of $1, it's probably having $6 of negative effect in the larger economy. We also have to get under control this money laundering that's been going through the real estate. We can, at the federal level, target the crime issue, and that will help on the poverty issue. But the idea that you can just promise that these things will go away with unlimited funds, South Africa has made all kinds of promises about, guaranteed healthcare, guaranteed education, guaranteed, housing. The only thing is, the government has to have the resources to deliver. So if you're only promising, that doesn't get you there.
Thank you. Question number 5. In terms of addressing addiction to substance, both legal and illegal, what do you think is most missing from our approach and available services? And what will you do about it? For instance, do you see a role for your party in supporting the expansion of provincially licensed or registered, i.e. regulated and monitored residential addiction services? Not so much in larger cities, but in smaller communities like Chilliwack. I'm going to open it up to Robert Begundy first.
Yeah, the fundamental of this, the solution that we see in connection to addiction is actually through connection. People who are suffering from addiction, they need to find themselves in communities. And programs that work are the ones that are going to be closest to those communities, the ones where the communities run it. I have been involved in Ruth and Naomi's in its early days, and I saw how Ted Stoker worked and connected with individuals and helped individuals. I was involved in Cyrus Center when it first started up, and again I saw how individuals connected. Those points of connection, they are absolutely fundamental in helping individuals to get back on their feet. And they can't come from Ottawa. Those connections cannot be built from Ottawa. The PPC does not believe the expansion of provincially run programs ought to involve federal interference. Now, that's why we think that the cities and the provinces need to have much more control over the tax revenue in this country, and the federal government needs to have less, so that the cities can make the decisions that they need to make. They are the ones closest to the problems. They are the ones often made to pay the cost of the services. They are the ones that need to have the funding secured. And we want to make sure that the system can't just pull the rug out from under them.
Thank you. Kelly Villanos.
Thank you. I believe it's all levels of government's responsibility because we are all one country. This is a great question, and there isn't one single approach to this. And I have some doubt that up here some people are going to disagree with my answer or where I come from. Let's start with a safe injection site. I've spent some time talking with business owners downtown. I've asked them, what are your thoughts about a safe injection site? Because I've heard this is something that you don't welcome. For the business owners that I've talked to, they've said to me that they would rather have a safe injection site somewhere within this community than every morning coming upon their doorstep and cleaning up drug paraphernalia and needles. This is something that I do each morning as well. Our senior society has a hall in town, and every morning before I go to work, I stop there and make sure that the seniors that are accessing the programs and services that they need aren't dealing with this issue. Where should the safe injection site go? Well, that's a really good question. One that can only be answered by bringing the right people together and doing the research that's needed to come up with the best location, something I can do and will do. And we do need to expand our residential addiction services, and that means we need to work with our municipal and our provincial governments to make sure that we are putting these where they are best suited in the community. Providing opportunities for public forums and roundtables, because the community members have a right to voice their opinions. Their voice needs to be heard, and we need to take their concerns to heart when moving forward on these issues. Housing plays a key role in addiction. We need wraparound services and to provide funding for community programs to treat addictions. Heck, maybe we should even venture into talking about decriminalization of drugs. I don't believe anybody woke up and said, today I want to be an addict. Addiction affects us all. We need to treat everyone with dignity and respect moving forward.
Thank you. Heather McQuillan.
So much like Kelly, I do believe decriminalization is very important in this conversation. We need to open up doors and support people as they come in for support. We need to expand those programs to provide spaces when people are ready to step away and heal themselves. We believe that people should be able to heal with dignity. And we believe that people should be able to get access to healthcare early and often. That includes mental health supports early and often. We believe that, and I'm sure there's going to be some press back, but we do believe that companies that have profited from the opioid crisis, from pushing opioids, should be investigated. People should not be turned as profit, and they have been. And that's something that we stand for. We can't let people be put behind profit.
Thank you very much. Arthur Green.
The Green Party of Canada is calling for drug possession to be decriminalized to deal with the opioid crisis. The Canadian Institute for Health Information reports between January 2016 and September 2018, over 10,000 Canadians died from an apparent opioid-related overdose. Fentanyl contamination of street drugs means that many of the reported deaths are actually poisonings, not overdoses. Decriminalizing drug possession will ensure that people have a safe access to safe, a screened supply, and the medical support they need to combat their addictions. A Green government will declare a national health emergency, increase supports for mental health and addiction, boost funding to community-based organizations to test drugs and report drug users, ensure that naloxone kits are available widely to treat overdoses. We'll also establish a suicide prevention strategy to address the growing anxieties of drug and alcohol-related addiction.
Mark Straw.
Thank you very much. I think first of all, it's fairly clear to me that the federal government shouldn't be the level of government that is determining where any of these types of services are delivered, or if they're delivered, quite frankly. That is a decision that should be made by communities, by the people that live and work here. And I think that is when I've talked to the downtown BIA, they are increasingly concerned about the concentration of social services in the downtown core. If that is where all of the services are provided, that is where all of the people who need the services will congregate, and that makes it very difficult for some of them to earn a living or to keep people coming down to those areas. So we can't simply have one zone of Chilliwack, and again, this is a municipal issue, but that's what I've heard from the municipality, that's what I've heard from the BIA, is that they're very concerned about the concentration issue. Not that they don't want to provide services, but they want to make sure that these are spread around into the community so that it's not just one group of business owners in particular that are dealing with that issue. Conservatives believe that given the opportunity and appropriate supports, many of the Canadians who currently suffer from addiction have the ability to recover. And the sooner that we can help them on that recovery journey, the more likely it is that they can fully recover. And I think that's where our system falls short. We don't do enough to prevent drug addiction, and we don't do enough to treat those who are addicted and help those who are trying to get clean with their recovery. I believe that we need to focus on detox, treatment, and recovery if we want to actually change people's lives. If those services aren't available, when a drug user is willing to access them, they won't be successful. Too often, we have a drug user who will say, I'm ready for treatment. Today's the day. And we say, come back to us in 6 weeks, we might have a spot for you. And of course, they're going to fall back into that habit that has ruined their lives. And so I think we need to have ready and accessible treatment and again, the full suite of treatment as well, not just we're going to get you clean and then we're going to turn you back out, or we're going to help you recover and then we're going to turn you back out. That is very, very difficult. So we need to work to build a system of care where everyone who struggles with addiction is offered the treatment and a pathway to recover. And we also need to, and we'll get to this in the next question, I believe, we need to recognize that people who are addicted to drugs, the overwhelming majority that are dealing with mental health issues. And until this country and its province and communities are willing to address the underlying problem of mental health issues in this country, these are just going to be symptoms that aren't treating the actual underlying problem.
Thank you. So question number 6. Medical model strategies continue to dominate mental health care in the public realm, whereas the psychosocial components of mental health care consist entirely of an assortment of private payers, insurance, and employee benefits. In British Columbia, for instance, counseling is not considered a health profession, and yet treatments like CBT, DBT, MBSR, and MEMDR are considered the best and most long-lasting treatments for many mental health conditions. What commitments would you make to counseling being a health discipline and included in expectations of transfers to provinces under the Canada Health Act? I'm going to start with Kelly Wilmos.
Thank you. Personally, I agree that counseling should be considered a health profession in British Columbia. As other provinces have passed this legislation, I think it's time that we bring together provincial representatives and other MPs and bring the right people together to start working towards this. We need to ensure that we are investing in our mental health. I've seen this within my own family, the need to have counseling services. I've had a daughter that's had to go through treatment, and if these services weren't readily available to us because of the fact that my husband has a system at work where it pays for it, perhaps we wouldn't have been able to access this. So I can understand the families in this community that don't have access to this and the importance that it brings. This would improve the lives of so many people. The local government is committed to removing the financial barriers for children and youth and their families to make sure that they have access to these services. It is no longer a question of whether we need to do this. We need to figure out what is the best approach and how are we going to make it happen. Spending on this type of treatment will prove to Canadians and British Columbians to be cost effective, both in terms of cost of delivery relative to other treatments and medication and the pharmacare, as well as providing a positive return on investment in our economy as a whole, investing in human beings. I'm committed to make sure we are setting clear national standards for mental health services because people need to get the supports they need. Mental health is crucial within our society.
Thank you. Arthur Green.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that the federal government needs to pony up when it comes to treatment for addiction. Governments of the day have dropped the ball badly on its policy of not supporting our most valuable asset, our people. It's almost impossible to find addiction treatment services. The institutions that are available are very expensive and are running at maximum capacities. When addicts come forward for treatment, we need to get them in ASAP or we lose them. Though our official position is to protect addicts from poisonings by decriminalizing all drugs, many of the constituents I speak with wish for some sort of mandatory treatment. I as well believe in mandatory treatment. I personally believe we should be using the current legal system to offer addicts a choice of going to jail or seeking treatment. But first we must make treatment centers available for all those who need it, not for just those who can afford it. Or we're just barking up a tree. This is a crisis that has affected every one of us, and it pains me to know that protecting our wealth has become far more important to us than protecting our people.
Thank you. Mark Straw.
Thank you very much. I'll admit, when I read the question, it was cast my mind back to my time on the National Defense Committee with the acronyms are very, for those of us that aren't in that field, a little intimidating. But I think what Conservatives believe is that the provinces do need to continue to have flexibility to deliver the health care for the people that live in each province, but they need to have the assurance that the federal government will be there to provide stable and predictable funding. Now, mental health care is a very serious issue which needs more focus from our senior levels of government, and I've tried to proactively lead on this issue in our community, hosting roundtables on mental health services in the community and advocating for those suffering from mental health issues and ending the societal stigma around those issues. Our previous Conservative government made significant investments to help address the issue and encourage a dialogue with all stakeholders to find solutions. We created the Mental Health Commission of Canada and provided funding of $240 million for it. We've also allocated $5.2 million to support research on treating depression with a focus on suicide prevention. Now, Canada's Constitution ensures that the delivery of healthcare services will always be led by the provinces and territories. By guaranteeing that stable funding that I talked about, it's up to the provinces to decide where they will provide the innovative services that we need to address shortfalls in our mental health care system. We've come a long way in our thinking about healthcare, I believe. Just as we now rely on nurse practitioners, registered nurses, and LPNs to provide critical care services, I think we need to look at better ways to engage mental health practitioners, not just the doctors and psychologists who are in such high demand and such short supply. Sometimes what is needed is mental first aid and maintenance. And we need to do a better job of delivering that with the therapists and specialists that are already trained in this field.
Thank you. Heather McQuillan.
Thank you. I've done a fair bit of work on the sewer union. Arthur and I are both part of the same union, so you might have heard a little bit about this. One thing that cannot be ignored is the root cause of the mental health crisis that we're facing. And I know in our industry, we work a standard 60-hour week, we work very hard, and we're exhausted. And that doesn't leave a lot of time to be connected to your community, it doesn't leave a lot of time for your family. And I think as I talk more about this, I think a lot of us are facing some pretty impossible odds. It's really no wonder we have a mental health crisis. You know, in the past, we've looked to solutions that come into the game too late. So rather than looking at the reasons we have the mental health crisis, we're looking at, the treatment centers we can have, which are very important. They are very important, but they're not the only piece of the puzzle. Additionally, we are committed to ending the stigma surrounding mental health and making early, consistent healthcare and mental health care options really accessible for people. That is a priority for us. It's a priority for us to make sure that people aren't being taken advantage of. And again, certainly in our industry, we hear a lot about it, but I've spoken to lots of people who have to have 2 jobs to make it work. And you just can't take care of your mental health when you are that stretched. You can't. When seniors have medications they need to take and it's difficult to get access to care, you're going to have mental health problems. You're going to have communities that don't have those supports. and early intervention will really help that, not just with counseling, which we firmly believe is a big part of the puzzle, but even before that, we need to be able to have support systems in place right from the core. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Pagundy.
Yeah, I believe that patients definitely need more options for treatment, and that these whole list of strategies involving counseling should absolutely be on the table. I don't like how so often the medical profession seems to just push pills as a solution, but they're kind of trapped in a model that says, well, that's what you do. And I've had, my best friend has been caught up in this system really, and it's devastated her. She spent probably about 10 years of her life every day thinking suicide, because she was being diagnosed with schizophrenia, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, diagnosed with a different type of schizophrenia, and every time pushing pills, pushing pills, pushing pills. And she kept saying, these aren't working. So what do? They up the dose. They don't listen, right? And that was her experience for 10 years. And then she found that they finally realized she had advanced MS when she lost sight in one of her eyes. They never looked at the physical, they only looked at the mental, and then they pushed pills. Now that's carelessness. Is a big problem, because in this country, it's almost impossible to hold your doctors, your medical practitioners to account for malpractice due to the fact that you have to prove malice. And we need to find some way that if extreme carelessness is being shown within the system, that we can hold them to account. This system angers me on a lot of levels, because so often we think that it's only an issue of what goes on in medical treatment. We actually have to be aware that our entire society is almost structured to ignore this problem. That basically what we have done is we have created missing millions within our system. Mental health affects maybe 5 million Canadians, and yet in a workplace, you will often, punish a person, a worker, because they're having a hard time coping with, high noise, high stress, high anxiety. Give them a place where they can retreat. I teach in a public school system. We have tried to accommodate different levels of learners at every different area, but then when they get into the workplace, oftentimes they are dropped. All those accommodations don't exist anymore, and really good, productive workers are not actually getting a chance to work and be successful because minor things are being missed, minor things are being ignored. And so I think we have to rethink the system. On some levels, we've got to take a step back and look at the whole of our society, and in some cases, we need to focus in and look at the actual issues of malpractice, because right now, our system is failing an awful lot of Canadians.
Thank you. So we have one more formal question, and then the committee is giving me one question from the questions that were submitted from the audience. So the final question, what strategy does your party have to ensure that all senior Canadians receive the medical and social supports they need to thrive through their latter years? Mark Straw.
Thank you. Well, our previous Conservative government was the first ever federal government to create a Minister for Seniors, focused entirely on the needs of Canadian seniors. And we have announced policies already in this election campaign that will make life more affordable for seniors by reducing their tax burden, removing the GST from their home heating bills, and increasing the age credit by $1,000. Obviously, the most important medical supports for seniors are delivered through our universal healthcare system. And as I've mentioned several times already today, a new Conservative government will provide stable, predictable, and increased funding for healthcare now and into the future to our provinces and territories. We've also announced $1.5 billion for new diagnostic medical equipment that will help our seniors as they age. We supported programs like the New Horizons for Seniors program, which helps local nonprofit groups serving seniors to improve their facilities and offer programs that help seniors maintain their social connections, which are so critical to maintaining physical and mental wellness as we age. And I think something we often don't talk about as well, but we need to do a better job of supporting seniors in their end-of-life care. Now, my colleague Marilyn Gladue had a private members bill on developing a national palliative care strategy, and it received unanimous consent in the House of Commons. We need to do a better job of ensuring that we provide more and better palliative care services in our communities, because as we near the end of our lives, we want to be closest to those that we love. We want to be in the least amount of pain possible, and we need to do more to offer better quality palliative care services right here in our communities where our seniors live.
Thank you. Kelly Valonis.
Thank you. Well, seniors, they matter the most to me. This is one of the reasons I'm stepping into this arena. I want to use my ability to be fiscally responsible, my accountability, and to obtain measurable results to invest my time, talent, and energy into seniors. I work with this population daily, and I want to make sure that one of our most vulnerable sectors are heard, cared for, and provided for. We need to continue to make sure that seniors are accessing affordable housing, healthcare, and the services they need in this part of their life. Our Liberal government strengthened the Canada Pension Plan, and we changed the age from 67 to 65. And we increased the income supplement for almost 1 million seniors, which has lifted over 50,000 out of poverty. Again, it's not enough, but it's a start, and we need to keep working forward with a plan that's working. We will continue our work with home care and palliative care and make it more available to those who need it, and the right to choose an end to life. We will continue to provide support to caregivers, as we know they need the support and dollars to do this daunting task. Our universal health care promise, which will make drug care more affordable. And we will increase old age security as seniors age. Past the age of 75, the benefits will go up by 10%. This alone will lift 20,000 seniors out of poverty. 2/3 of those seniors are women. The New Horizons program, Mark, absolutely. Our Liberal government is very proud that we brought that in. As your MP, I see that seniors are core to our economy and core to moving Canada forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Arthur Green.
Seniors comprise a growing proportion of Canada's total population, a majority of whom are women. They built the society we now enjoy, have a wealth of experience, and continue to contribute to the economic and social life of our communities and country. An essential duty of the social contract between government and citizens is to make sure people can live fulfilling and dignified lives. Green Party pledges such as a guaranteed livable income, pharmacare, public transportation, home retrofits, and affordable housing all contribute to seniors' quality of life. A Green government will also develop a national senior strategy with the following priorities. Ensure that the Canada Pension Plan remains robust and adaptive to changing needs and circumstances by increasing over time the target income replacement rate from 25% to 50% of income received during working years. We'll regulate the CPP Investment Board to require investment of coal, oil, gas shares, and ensure that all investments are ethical and promote environmental sustainability. We'll support innovative home sharing plans and other measures to allow people to stay in their own homes as long as possible. We'll create more long-term care beds in neighborhood facilities. We'll protect private pensions to amend the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act and Companies Arrangement Act to establish the prevalence of seniors and the pension plan in the creditor hierarchy during company insolvency proceedings. In collaboration with health professionals and professional territorial governments, develop and fund a national dementia strategy. Within 25 years, the number of Canadians living with a form of dementia could reach 1.3 million people. Imposing the highest economic, social, and health cost of all diseases, the strategy would support research, improve quality of life for patients and caregivers, and educate the public to increase awareness and reduce stigma. Amend the medical assistance in dying legislation to ensure that everyone has the choice of dying with dignity This includes allowing advance directives and guaranteeing the right to draw up a living will, what gives individuals the power to limit or refuse medical intervention and treatment.
Thank you. Robert Bagunde.
Now, I didn't very much like this question, and so I know that not everyone's going to like my answer. Basically, this says, how do you ensure that all senior citizens will receive medical and social supports that they need to thrive? No government can ensure that all of its citizens, senior or otherwise, are able to thrive. The reality is that being in politics, being in government, means making choices, making priorities, and we do not have unlimited sources of revenue. What you can do is try and make sure that you don't have the federal government pull the rug out from under the provinces, as was done by Paul Martin in 1995. You mentioned how you believe all levels of government should be involved in this issue, and I would say what Paul Martin did in 1995 is a perfect example of what the problem is. He brought in an austerity budget that basically blew up, the provincial budgets because suddenly they had to take on all the extra funding for healthcare and all sorts of other programs. Our share of the funding of healthcare dropped from 50% to 17% in those budgets. And the provincial government saw wait times go up on all of their medical services. We saw tuition costs go up. We saw poverty go up. Everything got thrown into chaos. And yet, what was the reaction of Canadians? They praised Paul Martin for balancing the budget on the province's backs. He was a hero, because it's almost like they didn't understand that all he did was transfer the debt to the provinces and to households. That's when our household debt started to go through the roof. And so we praise Paul Martin for bringing the financial system under control at the federal level, but we never looked at what it did to the provincial level. And the truth is, all the things that people are complaining about in healthcare and education and all the rest of it had its origins in those decisions made by Paul Martin back in 1995. And it's important to note something, that all of this that he did was a complete violation of every promise that he made in his Liberal Red Book in 1993. Never have we seen so carefully crafted promises delivered to the Canadian people as that Liberal Red Book, and never did we see so many broken in history. And so the question is, who are you going to trust with this? The PPC wants to hand over its control to the provinces so they can't be dropped flat at the whim of a government. That's why provinces have to be the ones to ensure this. They're the only ones who can.
Thank you. And finally, Heather.
So this issue has a little bit of a close side to me. I am the primary caregiver for my mother. She has Parkinson's. I didn't even know if I was going to talk about this to you today. She is someone who worked her whole life. She was a nurse. She cared for people. And as a senior, she has had a tough time accessing healthcare. She's had a tough time accessing, even medication. It's been pretty shocking to be seeing that firsthand. And I can only imagine what it's like if your family is not in the same house, let alone in the same city as you. And I think we are creeping up onto a place where a lot of families are moving away from their parents, and we need to have really easy healthcare systems to support our seniors. And it is not easy. It's not easy, and it's myself and my husband trying to navigate these. We are tech savvy, and we have an easy time picking up the phone and getting ourselves to different places. I can't imagine if you don't have that support system what that's like. And our platform is really about expanding that and providing people with services so they can retain their dignity. We're going to protect the pension plans. That is top on our list. And really just make sure that people can have dignity as they age. And I think, we've seen governments that haven't provided that. They've made promises, And they've, we've seen it time and time again. But we've seen the NDP hold promises. They've pursued the housing crisis. They're investigating. We've seen them hold true to childcare promises of creating spaces, and they're going to do the same thing on a federal level. They work for communities. They work for Canadians. They're not being lobbied by big corporations. And that is really the crux of why I'm here. So I do ask you to think about taking a stand and making a real change for Canada. Because, it's just not working. What we're doing is not working.
It's time.
Thank you.
There's been one question from the floor that's been selected as the last question. There's been a 78% increase in the e-cigarette use among high school students between 2017 and 2018. Does your party support more restrictive advertising for e-cigarettes and vaping products? And secondly, does your party support any other concrete action to help address the increased consumption in youth? I'm going to start with Heather McCoy.
That's a great question. To be honest, I would have to refer back to the party for their stand. One thing I can tell you is that we heed to medical advice and science. So we respect that, and we hear that, and we react. So I can only imagine that if this is a health crisis, if this is a health issue, we will address it the same way that we've addressed everything else in our platform, and that is early prevention and looking into what the source of that is. So I would have to refer to the party for a really exact answer, but based on the rest of our platform, I can confidently say that.
Thank you. Robert Puganovic.
Yeah, as a public school teacher, I have noticed the increase in the use of e-cigarettes. At one point in our school, the students put up a petition in the bathroom saying, "Could you please remove the toilet from our vape room?" All right. So it's been an issue, and we have to understand that this has, serious problems. Now, how are the young kids getting e-cigarettes? It's not usually through the local suppliers' stores because they have tough regulations on age. They're getting it online. They're ordering it online. And this is the question. We are really trying to keep this out of the hands of kids. Well, can I just go online and order a package of cigarettes? Can I go online and have marijuana delivered to my house? Can I go online and have alcohol, mailed to me? I think that we should be able to control e-cigarettes on this online sales in this way. And I think that's the magical solution. Now, I don't know that the PPC has ever, looked at this issue. I'm just speaking on myself, but I would look at whether or not we could regulate it the way we regulate other controlled substances and their online sales.
Thank you. Arthur Green.
Excuse me. Yes, we believe that it should be treated the same way as cigarettes are. It should be 19 years of age before you can have access to any vaping material. Yeah, you definitely should be able to get this stuff online. And it's the same with marijuana. You can buy marijuana online, but we don't have any, you can't buy it on the street, even though it's legal. I mean, we seem to get these issues kind of backwards. We definitely need more education on the situation. And as well, we should make it strictly illegal with penalties for sellers of vaping material, especially those people online. And with real penalties if they get caught, not just a slap on the wrist and a fine, which is just the price of doing business. So along with more education on how bad these substances actually are, and obviously they need to be studied more as well. So, this isn't a good thing where we're seeing people die from it now, and there's all kinds of health consequences. So definitely we need to do something urgent.
Kelly Valonis.
Thank you. Arthur, I agree with you. We need to make education key because we need to make sure that we're educating the young people before they start using these cigarettes. And I we need to make it less attractive, less sexy, so to say, which we've already done with the advertising and the ban on menthol cigarettes, cigars, and vaping products. We need to have clear restrictions on age and continue our restrictions on the advertising. And I agree with you, regulating online sales is something that we need to be looking into as well. E-cigarettes and vaping is a really scary thing, and all the stuff that's coming out on it now, all the facts that are coming up on the damage that it's doing, I think is really starting to take its toll. And it's just another indication of where we don't want to be doing that Band-Aid approach at the end. We need to start doing the proactive approach at the beginning and making sure we're putting the education, the plans, and the restrictions in place for the community now, for the youth, and for the future youth.
Thank you. And finally, Mark Stroll.
Thank you very much. It has been interesting to see the North American media has seized on this issue very much in the last number of days, and they're counting off the number of people that have died from vaping products. It is a little odd that there isn't that same focus on cigarettes, which continue to be sold in every corner store and are contributing to thousands of deaths every week. And I think that is part of the issue here. We need to treat these things consistently. I think that has been a real issue, is that vaping products have kind of been, I don't know if shadow marketing is the right term, but people, I think, have been led to believe that it's less harmful than a cigarette. And so that's why you're seeing people who normally might not be so publicly smoking a cigarette anymore, even though our grandparents all used to do it around the kitchen table, that now vaping is done out in the open, and it's almost seen as a safer alternative. And I think we really need to send a message that that is not the case. I do think that we do need to also talk about what are the public health targets here. We all know every level of government has a target that 0 people would smoke cigarettes. That's the goal of public health officials all across this country. What is the same goal for recreational smoking of other products or vaping products? Is it still 0, or are we saying that different things should be treated differently? So I think as we become more knowledgeable about this, we need to set public health targets by public health professionals. Quite frankly, this shouldn't be an issue that's politicized. We should be trying to find a way to ensure that if we don't want people vaping, that should be the public health goal, and we should work backwards from there, like we did so successfully with cigarettes over multiple decades.
Thank you very much. So this concludes this section of our warning. You do have an opportunity afterwards. Please do feel, I know there were a few other questions that we weren't able to answer. Do feel free to go to the candidates and ask them. I know there are probably at least 3 other debates or candidate meetings. I know there's 7. Okay, all right. CYC has one coming up, I know that for sure. So do take advantage of that. And if you would just join me in thanking CHC for putting this together, and all candidates for coming forward and giving you a choice. And please do vote on October 21st.